Well, welcome to another rendition of the Ground Investigation Podcast. It's episode 9. Today we have with us Chris Arnott. Chris, how are you doing?
Yeah, good, thanks. Good afternoon. Thanks for having me on.
So you were saying a moment ago you've listened to the previous podcast, so you will know what's coming next. I was wondering if you could give us a brief background on yourself to kick things off, please.
Yeah, no worries. I've been in the ground-related industries for 18 years professionally. I stumbled into an applied geology course in 2001 in Staffordshire. And then my first job was almost straight out of university into a multidisciplinary consultancy in the UK. I did 4 years there, sort of designing, procuring, supervising and reporting on ground investigations all over the UK with a strong emphasis on brownfield remediation and also a lot of work for the coal authority on legacy issues for them all over the UK. And then in 2008, I felt like a change, and I had some previous sort of links and experience in I knew a British consultant called Hyder Consulting. Did a couple of years with them, and then made a couple of other moves for sort of different reasons but similar. And then made a conscious decision 2015 to sort of try and come back to my roots a little bit, having been in some construction management, still ground related, but construction management type roles in Qatar and Abu Dhabi, to come back into ground investigation and geodata, site characterization, kind of where my grounding was, at least at university, and joined Fugro in 2015 here in the UAE, where I'm based in Dubai. And I've been with Fugro now for 8 years, currently the regional director for Middle East and India for our land business across the countries in that region.
So essentially you got into ground investigation, you read for your degree, and so you went into a consultancy at the time. Was that your plan to use your geology degree to go into this sector?
I don't think I ever had a plan. I think that was something that I find quite common across a lot of the podcasts that you've had, that people have ended up, the motivations for people taking those types of degrees are quite common. I can't remember which individual it was, but they spoke about, really just liking it outdoors and wanting to be out, but and have that mix of an outdoor life with a corporate life. And that wasn't even part of my plan. I went to university to do geography because I hadn't really done very well in all my other A levels, and I liked being outdoors. And I got to my university and had been promised there wouldn't be a lot of human geography, urban demographics. It was going to be a lot of physical geography. And my first lecture was all around how we were going to study human populations in urban developments around the world. And I spent the whole 2 hours thinking, I'm not going to enjoy this. I have to get out of this. This is a disaster. And I walked down the corridor to the other end and found the geology department. Went and spoke to a lecturer and said, I didn't do geology at A level. I don't know anything about it, but this looks a lot more like physical geography to me than what I just had in that lecture. Could I switch courses? And so I did, and I never went to a geography lecture again. I was switched straight away straight onto applied geology. So there was no plan. And then when I graduated, I didn't do very well at university. I had too much of a good time and not enough of a hard time. I was a bit lost, and I didn't really know what I was going to do next. And I ended up, I applied for a couple of jobs and I was offered them both. I liked the look of both companies. One was in Congleton in Cheshire, which is close to Manchester, which was an area that I kind of was quite interested to move to. And the other was in Nottingham, an area I didn't know very well at all, but I had a friend who just moved there, so that felt a little bit more convenient. And so I ended up in Nottingham, and I ended up in the industry, and I've ended up spending another 18 years in the industry. So yeah, I don't think any of it.
Yeah, you're right. It is very common. I don't think I've ever met anyone who's got into the ground investigation game intentionally. People just seem to come to near the end of their geology degree or geography degree and think, what now? And then I was the same myself. And then when applying for roles, the ground investigation companies were the ones that got back to me. And kind of the rest is history, essentially. So you were saying your first role after university was a geotechnical engineer for WIG. I was wondering if you could expand on that and tell us what you sort of got up to over your 4 years there.
Yeah, it was interesting because when I joined, they were still answering the phones as IMC WYG because WYG had bought the company that I joined in its entirety.
Yeah.
And so I joined a company that was named in part WYG, but was still very much from its roots in mining. And essentially
Hmm.
they had taken a core of the UK, well, what was the British coal ground engineering team. So some amazingly
Hmm.
exceptional hydrogeologists and geologists and mining engineers, many of whom went on to retire not so long after, but others are now in great positions within good organisations like the Coal Authority.
Yeah.
And so we were very much, the company was very much focused on mining. And so we were the sort of third party consultant on providing ground data and analysis and recommendations on the causation of a lot of legacy issues that were going through insurance claims that ultimately have to be managed and dealt with by the Coal Authority. And we were the third party consultant who would come and do some site characterization, try and identify causation in order to inform the outcome of the claim. So we did a huge amount of work. Every coal mining town. I didn't do any in Wales or down in the southwest in the sort of tin mining area, but I think all of the coal mining towns across the UK were towns that I at some point did a borehole in or visited through to do
Hmm.
some kind of assessment. So it was good. I got all over the UK and I spent a lot of time on sites and you come back into the office and I felt I had the perfect blend for me. I was outdoors,
Yeah.
getting a good tan in the summer, getting blown around in the winter. It
Hmm.
seems that these colliery tips, which are always flat topped, high elevation, you're higher than everything around you. You get some proper weather up there. So it was good. I really enjoyed it. And then you had the good mix of because they'd been bought by White and Green. You kind of came with a bit more of a corporate nationwide view on things. You
Yeah.
kind of got a little bit of a corporate life as well as that. It was a very traditional company, and I look back at some of the working environments and the characters that I worked with during that time with a lot of fondness. I'm not sure. I know that a lot of that and a lot of those people would not have fared too well in today's working environment, but it was a great base for me. And
Yeah.
some of the people that I worked for and alongside there, I still look up to, and I think we're sort of peers for the whole industry actually. So it was a really good grounding.
Yeah, God, it sounds like a good place to start and a good all-round somewhere to sort of dip your toes in, really. Get a lot of experience nationwide. So you managed sort of 4 years there, and then you moved on to go and take a role in Qatar for hydro consulting. How did that happen? And did you just get itchy feet and decide to go somewhere a little bit sunny?
I was very happy at White and Green. I was really sad to leave. We had a really
Hmm.
good bunch of, there was quite a lot of us similar age, and we were good pals socially. And my best man at my wedding came from, I worked with him at White and Green, and we had a really good group. And that's persisted. So a lot of the people I work with, then I'm still good friends with. And I felt I was developing. I jumped a couple of grades in 4 years, and so it was going well. But a few things changed, and I just felt like I should take an opportunity to try and look at something different. I had been to Qatar on holiday a couple of times. My dad, my stepmom, and my two half brothers had lived there, and I'd been visiting them, so I was familiar with the country. It didn't daunt me in any way to look at that, and so I kind of started looking, and almost as soon as I looked, a role came up, and it was with Hyder Consulting, who at that time were one of the leading multidisciplinaries in the UK. They were
Hmm.
knew really well and looked up to. So it was a great opportunity, and I had a couple of interviews with some highly technical people, and that probably was where the only red flag I had about it was that it was much more geotechnical than
Okay.
engineering geology, and that was where I began to sort of have a bit of imposter syndrome, a bit of self doubt because I was not a
Hmm.
geotechnical engineer, and at White Young Green I had a nice niche where I was managing a lot of the GIs. I was doing a lot of the procuring. I was writing factual reports and the basic GIRs. But when it came to the design side of things, I was just not. I didn't enjoy it. I didn't feel like it was a strength. And when I landed into Qatar, it was clear that although the supervision and the management of the GI and part of the wider project team that I was in was a part of the role, it was a geotechnical role, and I struggled with that. From a personal perspective, led to quite a lot of self doubt because at that point,
Yeah.
4 to 6 years into my career, I'm looking at the career path of this, this type of the industry, and says, well, you need to be a geotech and a senior geotech and an associate and a principal. And I'm thinking, I'm struggling with the engineering stuff at this
Yeah.
level. What am I going to do with my career? I really began to worry about that. I thought, I'm
Yeah.
4 or 5 years into a career that I'm not sure has longevity for me because I don't see I have the competency to go on. I just did not have that broader spectrum. And then to take it on to my next role, I got a job with AECOM on an enormous port project. It was actually a greenfield site. There was nothing there, but the government wanted to build one of the largest deep water container terminal ports in the world on a completely greenfield site. There was nothing there, and AECOM had taken on a project management consultancy role. It was enormous, and in the end, we had a team of nearly 200 people just as the project management consultant. I stumbled on that. I was playing football with somebody who asked me a question: was I a geo something or other? And I said, that's a weird question to ask me.
Yeah.
Football and drinking mates. He said,
Yeah.
yeah, I thought you were. And my dad kind of said he's looking for one. I don't know what it is he does. And I said, oh, who's your dad work for? He said, I work for AECOM down the road of the new port project. And I thought, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
can be
Do
now.
you like my CV?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So again, I stumbled into that,
Hmm.
and I got lucky there as well because there were people in that organisation who recognised that I wasn't there on a technical capacity. I was there because of my
Yeah.
experience in supervising ground investigation works, and they recognised that actually that was a construction management activity really, and that they needed resident engineers to be on that project for the next 5 and 10 years. And this is a $15 billion construction program over the next 10 years. And just very fortunate, I had some people who saw some potential that I didn't see in myself. And they asked me, well, beyond the GI, would you like to stay on and oversee the dredging and earthworks contractor? So in the end,
Hmm.
I became the resident engineer there, managing 15 inspectors, civils and assistant civils inspectors, and the statistics of that site were unbelievable. We excavated, processed, and then compacted 65 million cubic meters of soil
Wow.
and rock through blasting, and you can't understand those numbers until you start looking on Google Earth how big this hole in the ground was that we dug. And so I stumbled into it, but I had a very good
Yeah.
mentor in White and Green, and again in AECOM I had a very good mentor, and that's something that I'm quite passionate about, is that trying to let people who come into the industry understand that those of us in the middle parts of our career actually we really value trying to give something back to these people, because it doesn't feel like it feels like yesterday that I was sitting there racking my brains thinking, God, have I got myself into a career I can't stick it. I can't stick in.
Sure, sure. So you mentioned you've gone to Qatar. How did you sort of settle in? I know you said you went there a couple of times on a holiday before, but how did you settle in, actually living, working, that sort of thing?
Well, you just have to sink or swim, really. I mean, I think I don't think I had necessarily a bad onboarding experience, but I flew in. I was in the office the next day, and it was Ramadan, which is the Islamic holiday, which means that not during the daytime there's no drinking, no eating, and actually because of
Hmm.
for the last 14 years I've been here, that was Ramadan was in October. It comes back almost it's a lunar cycle every year. So this year it's going to come in. I think it's March, but it was October when I arrived, and so the day shift on a construction site during Ramadan is always the productivity goes down, which means in the
Hmm.
night shift it's always extra hectic. And I landed. I was in the office the next day, and they said, "Good news, we've got a project for you to go on to. We're drilling 10 200-meter boreholes in a basement of will be a high rise with 5 stories down, and you're on the night shift starting tomorrow." And I was there for about 6 weeks, where I worked the night shift. In the day, very little was happening because of people were fasting, and so pace of life was slow. And so my first 6 weeks was pretty abysmal, really. Just my working day was a night shift. When I was awake in the daytime, there wasn't much to do. So it was the first few weeks were difficult, and then I kind of
Okay.
found a community through rugby. Actually, I didn't play rugby; I played football, not to any level, just on a Saturday with the sort of local pub team. I couldn't find a football team, and I got told go down the rugby club, you'll find some people there, and ended up playing for Dar Rugby Club for a year, which I loved. And then I met a community, and then my girlfriend from the UK came out, and yeah, we started to think, oh, actually, this isn't too bad.
Yeah, yeah. What's the differences, or the main differences between working there and in the UK?
Um, well, there's a lot. I think at a higher level, I'm not sure I realised it until I kind of was with Fugro actually, and I was spending a bit of time in the UK and around Europe. I do
Yeah.
think that the pace here is fast in everything.
Yeah.
You can see that from what gets built here. It's the pace of construction and development is super fast, but the working life is also fast, and there's a lot going on at all times. Everybody's spinning a lot of plates, and I think that's common globally. I don't necessarily think that it's all sunshine and roses in the
Hmm.
UK, but I do think that the pace of the working life here is intense. But I think on the positive aspect, and I've definitely benefited from this, that means that there is a lot of opportunity as an
Okay.
individual, and that you can get a lot of responsibility and opportunity very quickly. And for me to be, I was managing ground investigation contracts and maxing at 150, £100,000 in the UK.
Yeah.
And when I landed, after the basement job, we did a lot of highways work, and I was awarding contracts of millions of dirhams, which is was 300,000 to 400,000 pounds without even flinching. And then I went from there onto a multi-billion-dollar construction site where I was, even when everybody was at site, I was the second or third in control of the project site. And, quite often
Hmm.
the two senior REs would be back in head office, and I'd be holding the fort, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And those types of opportunities just would not have been afforded to me. For lots of reasons, there's not so many of those types of projects around in the UK, but also there's lots of other Chris Arnott. There's lots of other very capable people that you're competing against. Whereas the being an expat, the talent pool is smaller, and so it's that combination of lots of opportunities and a smaller working population has meant that I certainly feel like I've benefited from it, opportunities, and I think I'm in a position now that I absolutely wouldn't have been if I'd have been staying in a UK career path. So I think that's probably the biggest difference for me.
Sure. Okay. Okay. And then you've moved from Qatar to where you are now, which is United Arab Emirates. How did that happen? Because you're not too, it's not quite the changes. It's from the UK to Qatar, but from Qatar to UAE. How did that take place?
Yeah, so before I was with Fugro, I actually left Qatar to join it was AMEC at the time, now AMEC Foster Wheeler, but as a contractor, contracted into the National Oil Company. So again, a run of luck. Somebody who, a friend and also a football teammate, said to me one day, he was a recruiter, oil and gas recruiter in the Middle East, and he said to me, "I've got a role for you with ADNOC, which is the National Oil Company of Abu Dhabi. I think you'd be really good for. What are you earning at the moment?" And I told him, and he had to check what currency I was earning, because I was working in the building and infrastructure market, and he was operating in the oil and gas market, and the pay scales were so completely different that he couldn't believe that I was earning that, because the oil and gas market was such a big uplift. And at the time, I also, my dad and my stepmom were living in Abu Dhabi as well, and we would travel across to Dubai and Abu Dhabi, for probably once a month for a weekend or whatever. So for me, I felt like I'd made it. I was like, I've got into the oil and gas industry. This is it. I'll be able to retire at 50, and I'll do a geology course. You'll dream of getting into oil and gas. And I ended up in building an infrastructure, which I was happy with. But so yeah, it felt fantastic, and I was there for 18 months within the oil and gas sector directly. But that came with its own challenges. I was a contractor, so ultimately AMEC had no motivation to develop me professionally. I navigated within ADNOC, and they needed in-house geotechnical or ground risk personnel, but nobody was empowered to make that decision. And so ultimately, after 2 years there, I had a great role. We were building. The organisation had built 4 artificial islands offshore, which were drilling platforms, and there was a hyper-technical issue with the ground improvement and the compaction of that, and we had an independent peer review that I kind of oversaw, not technically, whereas there was some some real industry global industry heavyweights, part of that peer review. So I had a great role for 18 months. But then when we moved into a cycle of the ground improvement and redoing the compaction, I was, I'd got a well-oiled machine. I had it slick. It was running itself. I had good site inspectors who were looking after all the works. And so I began to try and find, go to ADNOC and say, "Do you need any geotech experience, any support here?" And talk to AMEC about other roles with them, because this thing's it's just running itself now. But as a contractor, AMEC was getting paid for every day that I was on the project.
Okay.
So they weren't interested in pulling me off that project and
no, that's it.
Something that was maybe more professionally developing. So I began to feel like I needed to change, and I think my wife definitely said you need to change, because you finish it, you go in. It was a great working lifestyle. I didn't start work till 8:30, and I was home by 3 p.m. And I was paid really well. So on the face of it, what have you got to complain about? But I was still pretty downbeat about it. And at the end of the day, I was 29, 30, and I felt like my career was stalled, having left a really good job in Qatar. So I then said, no, I have to do something. And I thought, well, we still want to be in the UAE, in the Middle East. And so I said, well, if I'm going to work for anybody in the Middle East and stay within something that I think I enjoy and I'm good at and I have experience of, it's within site characterization, ground investigation, geodata. And for me, then there was only one company here in the region I was going to work for.
Sure. Okie dokie. What's it like doing business over there in general?
It depends who you're working with. We can't get away from that. We as Fuga, we have to be selective in the contracts that we take and the clients that we work with. Getting paid can be a real challenge, and so you do have to be selective about where you invest your time. And there are some enormous, on the face of it, enormous opportunities, huge construction developments but we always have to ask, where's the funding coming from?
Yeah.
Who's the developer? Who's the owner?
Hmm.
There's a lot of stuff, an architect it happened a few months ago, an architect did a sketch of a halo type structure around the Burj Khalifa, and that goes
Hmm.
around the Daily Mail and it goes global within hours, that the next big
Yeah.
thing in Dubai is going to be this halo structure around Burj Khalifa, and construction companies are clamoring to have their name associated with it. There's all kinds of fanciful things here, but where is the money?
Yeah.
And can you get paid? And you look at, in the regional role now, I get to see some of the other regions' figures, and you can see that on the face of it, it takes us at least 50%, sometimes 100% longer to get paid here than it does in the other regions, and so that's
Yeah.
challenging for sure.
Yeah, that must be a challenge for cash flow. I was I was actually warned a little bit about the area for geotechnical recruitment, because I can imagine there's many geotechnical recruitment requirements out there. But I had some advice in relation to how long it takes to get paid, that sort of thing. If you do get paid, you need to be very careful, essentially.
Yeah, 100%. And we have to be careful who we work for. We have to try and push for advance payments. We have to get payment protection into our terms and conditions. And
Okay.
often, even if we feel like we're comfortable to work with an agency, a company, or an organisation, when we then try to put these things into a contract, it can be quite telling when they get brushed away. It's more than just part of a negotiation. It's just a case of, well, we're not going to meet these things, so they're not going to appear in our contract. So at that point, it's like, you've probably come to that conclusion of there's maybe no smoke without fire. Maybe it's not worth taking that risk. We have to do the same.
Yeah. No, it's definitely, once you send your kind of terms and conditions, it's very telling who wants to waste your time and who actually wants to conduct business with you, I think, because some companies, especially in the recruitment side, they'll want you to do the work, but they won't want to sign the terms, which is kind of like, well, then you don't want to work with us then, because terms are, an agreed method of how we're going to work and what's going to happen if these things happen and all the rest of it. So it's an important part of it, isn't it?
The other complexity to here is specifically on that, is that we have every culture. You walk the streets of the UAE. It's like the United Nations. We have seasonal trends. There's a lot of certain demographics here at certain times of the year. But even in the business world, you take the tourism side out of it. Even in the business world, there's every nationality and every culture.
Yeah.
And in business, that means that you have every business culture and every approach to negotiation, every approach to contracting. So, the sort of Middle Eastern souk mentality where it's a race to the bottom. I've got to get the cheapest person. You're too expensive. I've got 3 people more cheaper than you. Give them the best price. That was certainly very prevalent in the region, and still is in certain industries and in certain countries. But we do see also a very progressive business culture with some organisations in some sectors. We're engaged with the Nuclear Authority. We're obviously engaged with all of the oil and gas NOCs and IOCs and the EPC contractors that service those. And the vast majority of those are quite progressive and forward-thinking. So when you receive that feedback of no on your terms and conditions, it's important to know who you're talking to and the culture of that person, because it could just be that is their negotiation tactic, and the reality is that you can step through that no and get to something that is workable for you, or it is just a race to the bottom and they'll get the cheapest and the lowest. So that's another challenge of working here, trying to understand the different cultures of business.
Yeah, no, that's a good one, because I mean, here in the UK, mostly deal with people from the UK and companies in the UK. But to kind of have to look into the background of cultures because of the certain nationalities is it's something which I've never had to consider, apart from we're kind of working with a company in Australia, although I don't think it's too dissimilar, or it isn't so far anyway. So you said you've worked for Fugler now for around 8 years. So you started there as a project manager, and quickly moved to project delivery manager, then country manager, and finally now, which you're the regional business line director, which is pretty quick. You've moved quite quickly in that organisation.
Yeah, yeah, I think you're right. It does go back to what I said about opportunity. That type of thing not happen in other aspects, in other countries or continents, regions. Sorry. So yeah, it's sort of the land of opportunity. But there's rationale behind each of those moves, and I kind of felt, I was very excited to come in and be a contractor. I'd been a consultant, I'd been a PMC, and I'd been client PMC as well. So to come and be a contractor, I was quite enthused about getting some control on project profit and loss and finances. That was something that I was involved with. So that was, really exciting for me to get part of. And then the other aspect to being here is that this part of the world is transient. People, the vast majority of multinational companies' staff will be expatriate. They'll have a plan in their mind, or if they don't have a plan in their mind, at some point they will probably go back to their home country, or they will go back to their home country because your visa here is completely dependent upon your employment. So, you have a lot of opportunity, a lot to do, a small talent pool, and of that talent pool, there's a lot of turnover. People come, particularly here in the UAE, a lot of people will say, "Oh, I'll come and do 2-3 years and earn some money, and then I'm going to take that experience and I'm going to get enough money home." I find people either do that, and then they either do 2 or 3 years, or they do 5, or they do 10 and never go back, or back for a long time. I'm in that 14-year category now, so I guess I'm here for the foreseeable. But so there's transiency within organisations. So whereas where I've been in the UK, it was quite clear what the roles were and what the pathway was, and that it would take at least one, if not a couple of people to move on or retire or get a promotion above them for there to be an opportunity for me. People leave, people come, people go. People look at you and say, "Actually, I think you could do really well in this, and why don't we move you over to this part of the business, because there's so much opportunity." So I've been fortunate, I think, in a lot of
Sure. Did you have the path in mind to become, something like a regional business director, or did you have the intention of kind of staying on the tools, as it were, I suppose, in the office and out on site as a geotechnical engineer?
As somebody who's responsible for setting plans and visions for staff, I should probably be better at having a plan. And the theme of our conversation so far is me not having a plan. No, I absolutely didn't. I still can't believe that I am where I am and that I have the role that I have, given where I thought I would be when I was leaving uni, just scraped a degree and not knowing what to do next, or leaving the UK because I just wanted to change, realizing that I wasn't going to finish my master's in geotechnical engineering because I just wasn't capable. You'd have asked me at those points in my life, which were not all that long ago, if I would get to where I am now. I would have said absolutely not. So there was definitely no plan, except the consistent thing for me was always I kind of trusted my gut instinct of, I didn't feel that role with Haider was going to be right for me in the long term, and I grabbed an opportunity when it came. I didn't feel, it was quite clear to me the role with AMEC, in the oil company was going to have longevity, and so I sought out something new. And I just kind of said to myself when I joined Fuga, I said, well, I think this is a company that is going to offer me a lot of opportunity and longevity and progression. And you could see that from LinkedIn and people moving through roles. And I felt like I'd done that well when I was at White and Green at the beginning of my career, that when I was in an organization that had mentors and line managers that recognized potential, I was given opportunity. And I thought, well, kind of looks like that type of organization to me, and it's within my core. So the plan was just not jump from something which was good in a lot of aspects. It was just, if you're going to make that change, make sure it's the right one. And I said, I really need to get out of this job, but I'm only going to move to Fugro, or maybe one other company I had in mind that maybe was something similar. And so that was the plan. Really, it was just trust my gut and go somewhere where I felt that as long as I performed and as long as I delivered, I would be respected and rewarded. And I feel that's what's happened. Is that I've performed well, and I've been recognised.
Yeah, sure. So you touched there again on kind of where you came from and what kind of role you're doing at the moment, about the imposter syndrome. So could you tell us a little bit about how you've suffered from that then, and what kind of advice would you give someone in the same position?
Yeah, I mean, I actually quite enjoyed giving it a name when I was thinking about things to talk with you about.
Yeah.
As a kind of a bit of self-reflection. I don't think I do. I certainly don't do enough self-reflection. And I came to realise that when I sort of analysed my career and where I've been and some of the decisions that I made, that I had at times felt, that I wasn't in the right place, and I followed my gut instinct. When I had been in jobs where I'd done well and I was promoted and took on more and more responsibility, my gut reaction was always, well, me, yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I mean, really, you want to offer me that? I'm not sure about that. Outwardly, and I think this is probably something that I can recognise and I'm quite good at. That outwardly, I project confidence, and I project that, yeah, okay, yeah, I can do that, no problem.
Yeah.
I think my dad said to me always, like in an interview or on a CV, just say yes, say you can do it, figure it out, and as long as you can figure out how to do it, people are going to be okay. But if you're that person in the room that's saying, "Oh, not too sure, no, I don't think I can," that's not a mentality or an attitude that is going to get you somewhere.
Yeah.
And maybe
Agreed.
that's wrong, but that's what's ingrained in me. And so no matter, I'm like that, what's the metaphor? Like a duck on the outside, you're cool, calm, and you're collected. You've got this,
Yeah.
no problem. I can do that. When internally, your little feet under the water, just pedaling like hell, thinking, okay. So when opportunities came along and additional responsibilities or new roles, I was like, okay, yeah, that's great. Thanks very much. Yeah, I feel rewarded for hard work. Thank you so much. But at the same time, thinking, wow, what is that person going to think of? I'm not as qualified as that person.
Yeah.
That person's line manager, and that's a bit awkward, and that's going to be a problem. And how am I going to deal with?
Yeah.
You go on to, I was asked to join a town hall for our team in Saudi, and there's 200 plus people on the call there. And it's the first time I've been on a town hall as their regional director, and I'm thinking, these people are thinking, what do I need a regional director for? He hasn't been to Saudi this year. And so I still have those thoughts, but actually in looking back on my career and typing up some things to talk about with you, I thought, well, that's kind of like imposter syndrome. I think that's what is going on in my mind. And I think we should normalize that, and that's why I quite like some of the conversations that you've had on here, is that, our industry doesn't talk about itself enough as it is. So that's the first thing. But to hear people from within our industry talk about how it hasn't been a straight line for them, and that they haven't always been the confident leader or the best geodata specialist or the best engineer or consultant, that they found themselves there. That was for me really important to talk about on this platform, because I'm sure there's people at university or graduates or junior engineers who are having the thoughts that we've all, it turns out, had when I think it's been quite common across some of your conversations. And so, yeah, absolutely. I think I have imposter syndrome. I still have it. And I think it's quite prevalent, if I'm perfectly honest.
Yeah, no, I think it is. I suffer from it a little bit myself. I think if you come from A and you're traveling towards Z, I suppose, at some point, I think it crops up for most people. I think it's probably part of the human condition, really. I suppose it depends on your outlook when you were growing up, and many different things to it. But yeah, I mean, I for one certainly I've suffered from that at the moment with trying to take on take on staff, and then you kind of think, God, who am I? Like 5 years ago, I was working in a factory. Who do you think I am to be doing all these things? But yeah, I think it's quite normal.
every time.
Go on.
Sorry, I think every time I go onto a site, I go onto a site and we've got this amazing, whether it's a jack up or whether it's market leading geophysics equipment,
Yeah,
drill rigs, whatever it is, and I'm surrounded by all these people who are just supreme at what they do, and yet they're all looking to me as the country manager or the regional director. And I'm thinking,
yeah,
as you know, way more than what I do. I'm just having to
yeah. Take over, please.
sure, give it a manager title, and you begin to think, well, they all know more than that about me. Should I be their manager? I mean,
Yeah,
you're right.
yeah,
An element of that
yeah,
human nature, and I think it's then how do you manage that? How do you deal with it? Are you able to compartmentalize that and move on, or does it overcome you and it impacts on your ability to outwardly project confidence in people around you? So I think somehow I've been able to deal with it,
yeah.
but that doesn't mean that it's not inside your mind.
Sure, no, definitely. So, who would you say has inspired and supported you most then over your career to date?
I've definitely had a couple of mentors, I think, that gave a lot of direction and put some responsibility on and saw some potential and gave me some responsibility. I think fundamentally also my parents and kind of their approach to professional working life. Both had different careers, but they're both, you work hard and you try and grasp opportunities and you try and be a problem solver and you try and be the person in the room who's trying to get things done. I think both my parents have done that through their careers, and so that, I guess, you certainly don't realise it when you're 21 and you're trying to find your own way. But I think looking back, probably that has something in me in the way in which I approach my work in life and the challenges that come your way. So I think that's an important grounding. I certainly, I had a manager when I joined White Young Green who was there. I had been there for a number of years when I joined, and I think is still there. Who was just a brilliant engineer, just a generally great human, nice guy, and I think I learned a lot about how far that can go, and that people will do a lot for you. They'll run through walls for you if you're just a nice person and you're a nice manager. And he gave me a couple of promotions and some responsibility and stuff when I was just starting out. So that was important. When I was on the port project in AECOM, there was two really senior American guys who 30 or 40-year careers in construction in America. This was kind of like a retirement project for them, really, being in Qatar for 2-3 years. They just pulled me into a room one day. I thought I was probably going to get told I was fired, to be honest, because the ground investigation work had finished. And they said, "We'd really like to come on and be a resident engineer." And I said, I don't know what that means. What is it? And they said, "Well, we want you to stay on and supervise the construction." I was like, okay, you think that's a good idea? And they said, "Yeah, we do. That's why you're here." And they put a team. They told me what the team structure should look like, what the people, the profiles of the people in the team should be, and in some respects, I was able to build that team myself, but just under that direction, having never done that before. So yeah, certainly there's been a few people along the way that have given me shown some appreciation and seen potential and given me opportunity. And then I try now to take that into my management or leadership. That when I see people, I try and lean in to make sure that they know that they're supported and that the door is always open. Now the door isn't always open because I have to be on back-to-back meetings all the time, and it drives me nuts when I hear people say, "Oh, sorry, I know you're really busy, you're really hard to get hold of." And I'm like, that's just the opposite of what I want to be. And I have to get better at that because it drives me nuts, and I think it drives people that work with nuts. But it's just a bit of time management. And yeah, so I try to take those things about just being a good person, and providing support, and then also giving people ownership and accountability. You can't nobody benefits from you micromanaging everything, because people around you don't develop. And to make people around you accountable for things that they're in control of, give them the tools and the support that they need to do that, and then let them find their way. And if they fail, doesn't mean you need to beat them around with a big stick. Open, honest conversation around what went wrong, and hope that there's learning there. So I think that, having had that as a leadership style that I worked under, I took a lot from that. So I give a lot of credit to a few people there throughout my career.
Sure. Okay. In terms of being in the Middle East, how is ground investigation valued? Is it valued there more than the UK, or are there still people that don't really see the value of it? How was that?
Yeah. Again, working in different countries, India is within my region, so a completely different continent, a totally different culture. The answer is different in each geography, and even then within each country, within the sector or the industry that you work in, the answer is different. When you work with the nuclear authorities, they value ground risk, at the very top of the challenges that they face, whether they're trying to, on the outset of their journey in a feasibility, or whether they're trying to manage an existing asset. It's governed by this global framework, and so ground risk is at the top of all the identified risks of a development. When you're working for a bit more of a cutthroat developer who's trying to build the next the 353rd tower that's in Dubai, that person does not see the risk in the ground the same way that the other end of the spectrum does, which makes working here interesting, because, as we spoke about earlier, there's a spectrum. You get everything from A to Z. Ultimately, that age-old phrase that's in our industry, that you pay for a ground investigation whether you do it or you don't, still valid. Yeah. I'm not even sure when that was first said. I think I've seen it recited. You see it every month, I think, online or whatever. It's in every textbook going. It's as true now as ever. I think a really interesting statistic that some of the Fugro colleagues have pulled out of a paper is that construction overruns in terms of time and cost are greater now than they were 30 and 40 years ago. So we're working with all these smart tools, BIM. We're now looking at GIM. We're looking at all the digitization of equipment and plan and design. When I joined IMC White and Green, we had a room where you would do all the drawings, and your plates and your figures in your report were hand drawn, right? And that's only 18 years ago. Now we have CAD, we have BIM, we have all of this stuff, and yet our construction projects are still overrunning. In fact, they're overrunning by more in duration and more in cost terms than ever. And when you drill down into that study, it identifies one of the main reasons for that is ground risk, whether it's unforeseen ground conditions or poor quality data leading to bad decisions and incorrect design or incorrect construction methods for the ground in place. And it all comes back to the ground. And we have civil and structural engineering put on a pedestal in the world, but certainly in the UK, when ultimately concrete is concrete, steel is steel. You can bend it, break it, you can put it into whatever shape and form you want, and you can quite easily, not easily, but you can quite straightforward apply models to it and understand what it's going to do. The unknown is where that structure that you know a lot about as a structural and civil engineer, when that interfaces with the ground. And actually how it interfaces with the ground here on this part of your site can be different to how it interfaces with that in the ground in that part of the site. And so we have civil and structural on this pedestal. And then geotechnical is just, you talk to civil engineers, like, yeah, I did geotechnical university.
Yeah, did a module.
Like, oh, okay, do you still feel that way when your tunnel the TBM machine is stuck in the ground for 6 months, and you're talking to your client about tens of millions of dollars to retrieve a TBM and why the tunnel's not going to be delivered, because you went with the cheapest ground investigation contractor who sold you the earth, and then guess what? When you got into that earth with your TBM, it was a disaster. The frustrating thing, I think, for the industry, and we can only really blame ourselves, is that this conversation is a conversation that I was educated about when I was at university. And you go back into some of the engineering geology textbooks and some of the early stuff, and that statement around whether you pay for a good GI, whether you have one or not, these go back decades.
Yeah.
And we're not learning, we're not improving. And so as an industry, we have to be better at promoting ourselves, first of all, which, things like this, the fact that you're the only GI specific podcast in the UK tells you everything you need to know, right? There should be multiple versions of you. We need to be better as an industry at telling the world the importance of what it is that we do. We also need to be better at explaining our value. We're very good at shooting out rates, and as a contractor, that's, as a GI contractor, if you're trying to find utilization, find work for your rig or your CPT truck, then you fire out a rate. But if we want to speak about getting the wider industry to understand the value of ground risk, we need to recognize that we need to start talking to them about the value of a ground investigation, not the price of a ground investigation.
Yeah.
So when we receive a bill of quantities and we get asked, please put your rates in here, for us that's almost like a no bid. And that, if you're a pure contractor who's trying to find utilization for your assets as a core part of your business, then you have to do that. You have to populate that bill. But if you're trying to do more than just acquisition, as Fugo, we're trying to do AAA, we're trying to do acquisition, we're trying to analyze the data, and we're trying to give advice on the data. Because those two A's actually, are quite low risk, and they also separate us. If we can provide all three. So when we're trying to have those conversations, we get a bill and it said, please give us your price per borehole. We're like, well, first of all, do you need 1,000 boreholes? I don't think you do need 1,000 boreholes. And if I give you a price for 1,000 boreholes, you're not going to like it. But if I give you a price for 100 boreholes to a shallower depth, 300 CPTs, and I can do it all in the same time, and I can actually give you some better data, which will mean I can generate you X million dirhams or dollars of saving in concrete and steel in the ground by reducing your pile length. If you can have those conversations, people begin to understand the value of ground investigation rather than the price. And that's a difficult sell, even in mature industries, in mature geographies and industries. In this geography, that's an even harder sell because it's coming from a soup mentality of race to the bottom. I think it's a common problem globally. I think some industries, some geographies recognize it better than others, I think is the best thing I can say.
Yeah. Yeah, again, you touched on something which kind of we go through as a business. We reach out to perhaps potentially a new client, and some people will just kind of come back to an email and just say, what's your percentage? But then, of course, you can't, and we're never the lowest percentage ever. But you can't get that over with just percentage. It's a high percentage, but it's not the same service. And when you think like that, it doesn't really make sense.
It depends what you're providing, right? If you're in a market that's heavily commoditized, which to a certain respect, land drilling is, certainly in some countries it's very commoditized, and there is not a huge amount of separation between the people in the market, then, and if you own one of those assets or you own a company that is in that market, then that's what it's about. It's about utilization. Some days you will receive that email and you'll say, I'll go as low as you like because I need utilization for the asset. But that isn't necessarily a sustainable business model for a large organization. And so you have to then focus on trying to find areas where you can differentiate or where you can add value. And that means that big opportunities come in and you have to pass them, let them pass you by, because why have two proposal managers working on a proposal for something just because the headline top revenue figure is enormous, but actually the reality is that there's very little profit in it for you because the market's really saturated, and there's 10 other people who are going to be half your price. You know, on the face of it, that's something that we should be putting a lot of time and effort into. Wow, look at that huge volume of drilling.
Yeah.
Actually, you can use your time a lot better somewhere else. It depends what it is, what part of the market you're in. Like, there are people out there who are, they need to find work for their assets, and that comes, you play with how much you want to make week to week.
Sure. So going back onto some more of the project-related conversation, what's kind of been the most interesting project that you've been on to date?
I think definitely the two big ones that I worked on. It was called UZ750, which is Upper Zakum, was an oil field in Abu Dhabi, where they constructed 4 offshore artificial islands to replace traditional drilling jacket platforms in the sea with islands, which is then it's a lot cheaper to drill from and maintain. And there was a big review of the ultimately these sand sitting on the seabed, and 30 meters thick at times, and very sensitive structures. A lot of geo-risk management. Not a very seismically active area, but we are not too far from Zagros in Iran belt, so we do have a higher seismicity rating than sort of some places like the UK. And there was a real technical issue with the compaction, and I learned a huge amount from a lot of very smart people, but I also learned a lot about ground improvement and compaction. And then before that, the other big one I was on with the new Doha Port project, or now it's called the Hamid Port now. Just because I was there, I ended up doing all kinds of stuff. We built, I think, 40 kilometers of fence. So for about 2 months, I was making sure that these guys are putting 40 kilometers of fence in the ground. You drive past, how many millions of kilometers do you think you've driven past the fence? You never even looked at how they might actually tension that together. Actually quite smart how they do that.
Yeah.
We built roads, so we laid tarmac, asphalt. I actually exhumed, not myself, I managed the exhuming, is that the word? We dug up graves, because this project site was so enormous. It had a graveyard, a historic graveyard within it, and so the local government came with the imam, and I had to oversee it from the project perspective to make sure it was all done as it was explained to us it would be done. And so, that project just was so much. I learned so much about so many different things I never expected to be involved with, that I think that is probably the best experience that I've had. Lots of good smaller projects that have taught me things. I had a very challenging project in Kirkcaldy, in Fife, where we were working in a hospital car park there for 6 weeks, and that was I learned a lot on that project about a lot of things. So not always just because it was big and bold, but I think I do go back to probably the port project as being somewhere that I just learned so much in 3 years that I would never have learned if I hadn't been there.
Sure. Well, what kind of advice would you give, someone new getting into the ground investigation, or perhaps maybe going into the more offshore site characterization sector?
I think first of all, you have to work hard. It's not easy, and on the face of it, there's probably a lot better places that you want to be at the beginning of your career, particularly now. I find myself cringing when I don't view myself as somebody who should be giving advice, but there is ultimately, working 18 years now, there are people coming in that kind of are like a different generation, which is terrifying to me. And the people coming into our industry now have a lot of options, and a lot of those options have really nice stuff like flexible working hours. You work from home. You can work from another country or another area for however many weeks of the year. The GI industry is still, you need to find your feet. You need to have your core experience of being on the ground. And so that means, or on the sea, sure. And so that means some difficult working conditions. And I think you have to go into that with your eyes wide open. For me, I loved being outdoors. I loved getting absolutely smashed with wind and rain. I say it now, I'm looking back, I've been in the Middle East 14 years, it was some rose tinted glasses.
Yeah.
But, you know, you need to work hard. And then I
Hmm.
think for me, and I've seen it from some of my peers and some friends, that, you know, the people that work hard and put the effort in, and
Yeah.
are problem solvers, 9 times out of 10, that will work for you. You know, you can get very
Yeah.
lucky and you can have a very bad line manager, or you can be in a bad organization where you do that and you just don't get recognized. But before you jump to that conclusion that it's the company or your line manager's
Hmm.
fault, you know, have a look at yourself and say, well, actually, am I telling me
Yeah.
I'm working really hard, but, you know, am I? And I think aligned
Yeah.
with that is, I found that I ended up getting asked to do a lot of things and I got a lot of opportunities because when something popped up, you know, we were talking about exhuming the bodies, you know, we were talking about it in a weekly meeting. Somebody needs to go and supervise the exhuming the bodies. It's going to be difficult. The government's going to be there. There's going to be imams from the religious education is going to be there. We don't know how long it's going to
Hmm.
take. But, you know, you've got to send somebody up there. I was like, I'll do that. I'll do that. I mean, first of
Really?
all, just something different. I'll take on something
Yeah.
different.
Yeah.
But I think if you're
Uh-huh.
somebody who's seen as a problem solver, somebody to people want to, if they've got a problem, they're like, oh, I think Chris might have a look at that, and whether it's related to something you
Yeah.
do or not. If you're a sort of
Hmm.
yes person, that doesn't mean it's a yes. If you're a, yeah, all right, well, do you need some help? I'll try and figure out if I can help you. Versus the I'm really busy, you know, I just haven't got time. I'm really, really sorry. And that,
Yeah.
trust me, that in my role I'm in now, I feel like that a lot. I just don't feel I have the time to answer and support everybody that I want to support. But if your gut instinctive reaction is a negative when you're asked, can you help with something, rather than positive, it sets a tone. So I think if you work hard, put effort in, and you are, you know, you're available and you show that you're willing to help and you're willing to support, I think you'd be very, very unlucky to not have a good career growth doing those two.
Hmm. Yeah, you have to be accountable for yourself, don't you? You have to take everything almost as if it is your fault, even if perhaps sometimes it's not. But you have to think, how can I get around this? How can I move on from this, or
Absolutely.
whatever it is? But you can't just look to external things because everything is. You can only control what you do and how you think about things, I suppose. So, what kind of a typical week look like for you now, Chris?
I've been in this regional role for a little bit under a year, so still finding my feet a little
Uh-huh.
bit.
Still finding.
Yeah, and understanding where I can be most effective. You know, there's really, really strong
Hmm.
teams in each of the countries that I oversee, and so it's about identifying. You know, I can't add a huge amount of value when there's an organisation that's really functioning really, really well. So in that country or that
Yeah.
organisation, it's about being a support function to the country manager. You know, just, you know, do you need any help? Do you need somebody to talk to? And how can I
Okay.
help maybe with your vision and your strategy and a link to the global team. In other countries, there's maybe opportunities that perhaps not being explored, and so trying to help explore those and help. And then also firefighting, right? When there's an issue, being there as
Yeah.
an additional support to the in-country team, to help deal with issues, as well as ultimately overall my primary role is the financial performance and the HSE performance of the region. So there's a lot of time spent on reviewing the finances for the region and doing all of the
Hmm.
internal reporting that being part of a listed company comes with. So a lot of meetings, and I need to get better at managing my time so that I can make more time to be just around having conversations with people in the corridor, which is what I like to do, where I get a lot of value. I need to find more time to be present at sites.
Hmm.
Again, I think that presence of management at a site really can be fundamental to influencing the HSE culture, for example. And if you're not present, visible, you can't then criticise the culture at that level of the business. So at the moment, my week is, you know, just a lot of meetings, and I struggle to try and block out time to. I need to go into a site visit next month. When's that going to be? Put that in. I need to read this book, or I also try and find some time for professional development as well. And that's just not possible without putting that structure into my week.
Yeah, definitely. So what are some of the most important lessons that you've learned over the years? And what advice would you give yourself? If you could go back in time, what advice would you give yourself?
I think other than what we spoke about, just working hard and being a go-to for people with issues and trying to be collaborative, taking accountability, like you said. I think trusting your gut instinct, I think, has got me quite far. But again, I think you have to, it's a generic statement to say trust your gut instinct, because I think you do have to question, as long as you're really questioning those decisions around, am I career path, really challenge that thought process, because it might be that the problem is you, not the organisation or your line manager. But I think working hard, trusting my gut has served me well so far. Nobody is more, as a line manager, you're always responsible for the development of your employee. But as an employee, as an individual, nobody is more accountable or responsible for your development than you. And so if you don't take ownership for your professional development and try to push yourself and challenge yourself, yes, your company and your line manager has a responsibility to try and develop you and bring you on. But if you're not doing that, there's no motivation from them. So work hard, trust your gut instinct, be available as much as you can, and invest in yourself.
Yeah, definitely. I couldn't agree with that anymore, to be honest. So if you could click your fingers, what would you kind of change about the ground investigation or the site characterization industry? And on the flip side, what do you really love about it?
I think we need to be more visible. I think we need to push ourselves as an industry. If I could flick a switch and change everything, I think the same amount of appreciation of risk from civils and structurals part of the projects that we work on, and that's onshore and offshore, would be applied to the ground. And I think if that appreciation was there across the whole, the supply chain and the whole project life cycle, I think that would make our industry far improved, and would give us the profit and the money that we needed to invest in our assets and our people and our equipment to then advance the industry, because we can't help but be stuck in this cycle where we're using SPT testing, for example, which is something which was designed for a specific type of sand 100 years ago. You have towers and structures all around the world designed on test results from banging a piece of steel into a piece of ground that bears no resemblance to the location in which this test was established, or any of the correlations that you then try and tell yourself it relates to. We're stuck in these cycles because we don't have the money and the profit within the industry to develop all of the cutting edge site characterization techniques that are needed to move the industry forward. And so if I was to click my fingers, it would be that the risk in the ground was perceived the same way as the risk of the structure in the building and in the industry. What was the other question? What do I enjoy?
What do you particularly enjoy about it?
I like I still love the mix of being the corporate, but also at site. I still enjoy that we live in a corporate world, and we're doing, in some cases, really large and challenging projects, and sometimes really small projects. But we can also go out into the field and go to exotic places and do things that you would never have thought possible. I also enjoy where the industry is going. Fugo, we really invested we are really invested in trying to differentiate and digitize. And particularly in the land side of the business, we've come out with more sort of innovations, both in terms of assets and equipment and steel, but also in the back office in analytics that we provide. I think we've come out with more of those in the last 5 years than I've seen in a long time, and the future is bright. There's more coming, and that's really exciting. It's a really exciting time to be trying to be in the industry, because we have these tools and processes and ways of looking at things that are forward thinking, and so it's a real challenge now in a business role to try and get people to understand that actually maybe banging a piece of steel that's connected to a 40-meter long piece of steel into a piece of ground, and then trying to correlate that to something from on a chart from that's 50 years old, perhaps isn't the best way of designing your really important structure. And we actually have something much better than that. Then you have to have the conversation about the cost of it, because you want them to understand its value-based price, not just cost up. So that's what I enjoy at the moment, is that we have a lot of market-leading solutions and cutting-edge ways of doing things and analysing things, and then trying to get them into the marketplace. That's what I find the most interesting at the moment for me.
Well, that pretty much takes us to the end. So that's episode 9, all done and dusted. Thanks very much for coming on and sharing your career highlights and insights over your time. But yeah, thanks very much for your time, Chris. Most appreciated.
Yeah, really appreciate it. Thanks very much. And keep up the good work. It's great to hear from other people all around the industry, all around the globe. So yeah, thanks very much for the invite.